Welcome to the podcast where mental health is at the core of what we focus on. We strive to develop people like you to maximize who you are and what you've been called to do by sharing tools and resources for better brain health. And now here's your host, Juan Garcia.
Welcome to the podcast where we focus on mental health and peak performance. We believe that our mind is the most influential aspect of who we are. And when that's healthy, then the rest of our lives are led by healthy choices. And this series, we are going to focus on untangling relationships. And the reason why we use the term untangling is because some of the relationships that we have are toxic and we don't realize where the toxicity is coming from. And there's just a lot of weaves and webs that are created along the way. And this is mainly because of some codependency traits and tendencies that we develop. Obviously, a lot of this, we don't realize we do it. So that's why it's so difficult to highlight it, obviously, and also to get to the root of it, because we're probably telling ourselves, I don't do that. I don't really do that. Or if I do that, I don't mean to do that. And if we feel that we do it unintentionally, then we may not feel the obligation to identify it and replace it with healthy habits. So here's a definition for what codependency can look like, or at least how can we describe it? It's a word which often is used to describe persons who have been affected by difficult life circumstances. As a result of these different life circumstances or events, either during childhood or later in life, many individuals, and here are 6 bullet points. 1, have difficulty seeing persons and situations realistically. 2, feel that they are responsible for the thoughts and actions of others. 3, are susceptible to control by others and or are controlling of others. 4, feel unhealthy amounts of hurt and anger. 5, feel guilty for things about which they have no control. And lastly, develop a life of loneliness without true intimacy. As you can imagine, living like this, even though we may not realize it, can be very harmful, very toxic, and unhealthy. And so I wanted to do this series to kind of discover some of these tendencies potentially that are showing up, and how can we overcome these things from showing up in our relationships. Because as I tell everyone that I speak to about this, I say, you go wherever you go. In other words, you show up wherever you go. You're with you. You can't ignore you. And what I really mean by that is sometimes we forget that how we truly feel and who we truly are actually comes out. We may hide it for a while. We may try to, put a facade and personality change. But as we talked about temperaments a while back in this podcast, temperaments don't change. As much as we want to suppress them, as much as we want to put a front with a personality, our temperament will try to come out, because that's our natural, innate, and inborn self that truly cannot be hidden or forced out of our lives. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that in a healthy way. Now, I want to share with you a graph that kind of depicts exactly how this looks in terms of sequence, if you will. You may not see it visually, but I just want to give you a description of it so that you know where we're going. So first of all, codependency obviously comes as a result of a dysfunctional family. So that would be the first graph or picture that you would see on this graph that I'm trying to describe to you. Then, as a result of that dysfunctional family, we have 3 things that are contending with our thought process. One is the lack of objectivity. we just don't see things for what they are. We see things because of this lens that we now have due to the dysfunction that we grew up with. Everything that we experience, everything that we see has this lens that we use. It's almost like putting your sunglasses on, and all of a sudden the light is not so bothersome. Or you use glasses, prescription glasses, and you don't have them on, but all of a sudden you put them on, and now you can see things that you wouldn't be able to see. So when we have a dysfunctional background in terms of our family unit when we were growing up, we will have automatically this warped sense or lack of objectivity. We just can't see things for what they are at times. So this makes it difficult for us to make really good decisions, or the motivation behind the decisions that we make are probably not the best. Another aspect of that is that we have a warped sense of responsibility. We think that we have to fix people. We think that we have to help people even if they're not asking for our help. We think that if we don't do something, we're going to feel guilty. We're going to feel bad because we didn't do that, even though it may not be our responsibility. We want to change people. And these are things that come from codependency because of a dysfunctional family. And another thing in that aspect is we're either controlled by someone or something, or we are controlling. And this is a word that gets misconstrued at times because it's not necessarily the puppet and puppeteer type of reaction. It's mostly things that we do or we say or don't say that is manipulative in nature. And this could be very, very strategic. It could be very, very schemish. Although, again, these are things that we may not necessarily plan or think about. We don't do them intentionally necessarily. And these are the things that we want to highlight because we want to understand them for where they come from and how we can get rid of them. And then obviously these thoughts, right? We are either controlling or being controlled. We have a warped sense of responsibility. We have this lack of objectivity. These are all mindsets. These are all thought processes. Then obviously they affect our emotions. And some of the emotions that we deal with constantly in this cycle is guilt, loneliness, hurt, and anger. Guilt, loneliness, hurt, and anger. And these constantly influence our behavior. The decisions that we make, they mess with our will. And then eventually they develop a codependent lifestyle. And this is how we show up to relationships. This is how we engage with people. This is how we establish how we're going to engage in relationships. And a lot of this is very toxic and unhealthy. All of it, actually. And clearly, the reason why this happens outside of the fact that it is from a dysfunctional family unit is because these are ways that our brain has convinced us that is necessary in order to protect us, in order to protect our hearts, in order to protect our minds, in order to protect the pain that we have to experience because of the hurt, because of the letdown, the abandonment, the rejection, all of these things that we experience in our childhood. Our brain registers these things, records them, files them away, and then uses these types of thought processes like lack of objectivity, warped sense of responsibility, and control or controlling to say, if you don't do these things this way, you're not going to get through this. You're going to get used. You're going to get left behind. You're going to be rejected, etc. So what we want to do in the process of this series is we want to identify it. We want to detach from it. And then we want to make a decision that is non-codependent, a decision that is healthy, a decision that can lead to better ways of engaging in relationships, because we don't want to live codependently. This is not a way to live. This is not a way to have relationships because ultimately we do get hurt. Ultimately, we experience all the things that we think we're protecting ourselves from. We are going to experience it. So now, if you are dealing with any of these traits, tendencies, reach out to us. We have a whole process that we use in order to help you navigate all of these codependencies. I know I grew up with a dysfunctional family, and so I had to deal with identifying, detaching, and making decisions that are healthier. Because again, having been married and having children, we show up this way. And a lot of the years in my marriage could have been a whole lot different had I identified these things early on. And now our marriage is the best ever. And our children's interaction, our relationship with our children, although they're adults, our daughter's 17, she'll be 18 this year. So technically they're adults, young adults. They're just phenomenal because we understand each other. We know each other's temperaments. We know how we're wired and how we're going to show up. And so these are helpful ways to understanding who we are and how to make better decisions that are codependent free. So reach out to us if you have any questions regarding this. We are here to support you and help you with your mental health and peak performance. And so we're just so grateful that we have a platform where we can share this information. And please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell so you know when we drop the next episode of this series, and let your family and friends know that we are touching the topic of untangling relationships so that they are also learning these very insightful tools and resources that we want to provide. Until the next episode, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. For more information, visit our website at juangarciaenterprises.com. Our host, Juan Garcia, is available for speaking, coaching, and one-on-one counseling. You can email us at info@juangarciaenterprises.com. Until next time, remember, we only have one mind, so mind yours.